Okay, you are now live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Finance and Corporate Services Committee meeting for the City of Barrie. Today, August 19th, 2021. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:02 p.m. Again, due to COVID-19, we're meeting virtually and we have staff as needed available on the call. Section 1 is open delegations. We have 2 open delegations tonight. And there was also an expression, I believe, Councillor Harvey will be joining this meeting momentarily. So I just wanted to ask members of committee, he was hoping that we could obviously cover material that we can with the committee, but that we do our best to allow the deputation in his ward to be done later so he can attend. So we can start with the delegation as our agenda is printed, which is the 352 Yonge Street 1, and we can get to that item and we'll see if Councillor Harvey is there. If not, we can adjust accordingly if members of the committee are okay with it. So first delegation is provided by Aylin Osterk of Barrie Heights Family Dentistry concerning the water service repair at 352 Yonge Street. And I'll call upon Aylin Osterk to provide the open delegation. Mr. Osterk, please note that in accordance with the city's procedure bylaw, you have 5 minutes to provide your comments.
Hi, my name is Eileen. It's Mrs. actually.
My apologies.
No, I get that a lot. I get that a lot. No worries. So good evening, Chair and Council. I'd just like to thank everybody for your time, and I'd like to also thank Councillor Jim Harris for kind of being the first point of contact for me on this issue. Again, my name is Eileen Osterk. I'm here today speaking on behalf of Barrie Heights Family Dentistry. So our concern today is regarding the leak in the main water valve that we have for our building. So we initially were contacted by the water operations branch of the City of Barrie, who advised us of this leak and also informed us that due to the wastewater billing bylaw 2016-115, section 14.5 to be specific, we are responsible for the cost of repairing this infrastructure since we fall within the scope of a commercial zone. Now, this leak is located on the boulevard, which is the area of grass between the sidewalk and the curb. And so therefore, this is not on our property, nor is the damaged infrastructure our property either. I understand that due to the wastewater billing bylaw, it still falls within our scope to repair this. We are a small business. We're operating out of a former residential home. The size of the building is approximately 800 square feet. On one side of our building, we have a much larger commercial building, which is a Tim Hortons. This building has industrial sized pipes. On the other side of our building, we have a row of residential homes. They're all the same size as our building, and we all have the same size pipes. I understand why the Tim Hortons might fall within the scope of this bylaw due to their industrial sized pipes and the cost of repairing those. However, they also have more financial stability than a small business such as ourselves. So how are we expected to be able to afford these repairs? The cost of repairing this leak was quoted to us anywhere between $3,500 and $5,000. The way things go, we all know it might be closer to $5,000 in the end. Like many other small businesses, this pandemic has already delivered a substantial financial blow for a variation of different factors. We've been trying to recover from this financial difficulty since the beginning of the pandemic, nearly 2 years ago. And the financial responsibility of repairing this leak would be a significant loss for us. With the provincial restrictions and lockdowns, as well as the tight COVID protocols implemented by the RCDSO, which is the Royal College of Dentistry, all of which are necessary, we don't have the same volume as we did prior. On top of this, our expenses have gone up due to the abundance of PPE that we've had to purchase, the plexiglass and the glass that we've had installed at our front desk in order to protect our patients and our employees, and all of the HEPA filters that we've put in each individual operatory to purify the air, as well as all of the other disinfecting systems that we've invested in, most of which are mandated by the RCDSO. We're happy to comply. We're happy to do this to ensure the protection and the safety of everyone. However, it has been a pretty expensive time. I'm here this evening to ask the chair and the council to consider our issue and the situation that we're in. We would greatly appreciate it if the city of Barrie could provide us with the financial relief that we're looking for, and I guess an exemption in this case from the bylaw, due to all of the factors I've listed, but mainly due to the financial instability that we're experiencing right now and the stress that this would put on our finances. I'd just like to thank you, Chair and Council, for your time and for your consideration of my issue.
Thank you, Ms. Osterk. We appreciate the delegation. Members of committee, do you have any questions of clarification from the deputy or staff? Mayor Lehman, go ahead.
Thanks very much for your deputation, Eileen. Actually, my questions are for staff. Mr. Chair, you want those now? Okay. Yep. So to staff, I noticed in the memo on this matter, we've seen 16 ICI water service breaks over the past 5 years. Do you know how many of those occurred in the last 18 months? Is it fair to guess 3 or 4?
Through you, Councillor Morales, to Mayor Lehman, in the last 18 months, since March of last year, we've had about 6 similar breaks within the ICI sector. And
when you say similar, were they all relatively small diameter, or did we have a really big one go?
No, these were all service main breaks, meaning it's the service connections to the properties.
To the mains, yeah, okay. But relatively small diameter, Bala?
That's correct. I don't have the specifics, Mayor Lehman, but we can get the details if that's needed.
Okay, and I did notice the deputant was quoting 3,500 to 5,000. The memo quotes 1,000 to 2,000. Why would, I mean, obviously staff have a lower number. What's that based on?
Through you, Councillor Morales, Chair Morales, to Mayor Lehman. Our staff, they assessed the amount of work that needed to be done. And based on their assessment, they had said it would be between $1,000 and $2,000. You know, without reviewing the quote that was provided to the owner, it's you know, it's difficult for us to assess what that quote was based on. But our staff's assessment was that to fix the leak, it would be between $1,000 and $2,000.
Okay, and Eileen, you had a quote that came in at that amount that you were quoting us, or did you have a few quotes?
No, we had just the one quote where dealing with a guy named Jay.
Okay, so possible we might get a better price from someone else, but we don't know that today. Okay, those are all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, for those questions. Any other questions? Councillor Harris, I saw your body language. I don't know if I quite saw your hand there. Do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Chair Morales. And thank you, Eileen, for your delegation. And thank you, Mayor Lehman, for the questions. Those are similar to what I have. You know, that's a fairly big difference between the quote that we thought from the city side and what you've received from providers. So that's obviously concerning, and hopefully there's some way that gets better. And yes, businesses have obviously been hit by COVID, and I understand, you know, your business as well. Just curious, and I don't know the business well, as far as many businesses have had subsidies and some healthcare related ones, government programs to defer some of the costs related to COVID. Are any of those options available to the dentistry profession to help reduce some of the costs that obviously the PPE and the things that have to be done to limit exposure?
I believe that there were subsidies initially for dentistry. However, I'm not 100% certain, just because I haven't been involved with the business for the entire length of the pandemic. But right now, I don't believe we qualify for the subsidies that remain.
Okay, thank you. So they may or may not have applied for them prior
At the very beginning.
Okay, thank you. Wondering also, maybe this through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. We did receive a report and it talked about it, as Mayor Lehman referenced the 16 examples of similar type situations and how our policy has been applied. Are there any examples across the 16 incidents where we've made exceptions to our policy? Maybe that could be, I don't know if that's for Mr. Arana-Sundaram to answer. Thank you.
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Harris. Of the 16 breaks that we encountered, no, none of them were given any exceptions to the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
With the exception of one of the breaks where we did the repair, but even in that instance, we charged that back to the property owner and that was paid.
Okay, maybe a follow-up, if that's okay. So in the instance where we did the repair, what would have been the rationale for us doing the repair? Just if I could ask that.
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Harris. Usually we notify the property owner and request that they do the repair. In the event that that doesn't happen, depending on the circumstances, sometimes we would undertake the repair just to maintain the integrity of the system and then bill that back to the property owner.
Okay, thank you. And just obviously, you know, the sensitivities to the impact of COVID on businesses, and you know, obviously it's hard to do dentistry by virtual. I understand that you could probably, you know, nothing's impossible, but certainly the main part of the business is definitely in person. Just wondering, with this incident, we haven't had any precedent of doing this for businesses. The reference was this being, you know, a kind of a converted residential home that is now a business. What bearing, if any, does that have on this? Maybe again for Mr. Arana-Sundaram, if we could ask through you, Mr. Chair, is like, what is that? Because that was an important point considered by Ms. Osterk. I just want to know if there was any, what your thoughts were in that position.
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Harris. We as staff, we apply the bylaw, which states that institutional, commercial, and industrial clients are responsible for all the costs from the water main to the meter. You know, we don't assess individual properties to try and differentiate between what type of structure or what type of you know, business might be operating. So we as staff, we just apply the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And I'm wondering, and maybe this again, question to staff. You know, it's a challenge to. I know I appreciate you looking into it as far as what could be done. And I understand that we have applied this, and even I thank Mayor Lehman for the question. Even during the COVID period, we've had similar instances of this happening, unfortunately, to businesses. In some instances, we've had where we could defer, have payment plans or extend the cost over a period of time. Is that something we could do in this instance? And maybe that's a question through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Millar. Mr. Miller, sorry.
Through you, Chairman Morales. Yeah, in this case, if the city were to do the repairs, absolutely, we could entertain a payment plan to help the business. We have, for example, some businesses have had challenges with paying their water bill. We've entered a plan with them to pay it off. So again, in this case, if it's the city's doing the work, it's obviously easier to administer something like that.
Okay, thank you. So that would require us, I guess, to go back out and maybe sharpen our pencil around the quote that we gave. Is that fair? Should Ms. Osterk and their group want the city to do the work? Is that, I guess, a follow-up to Mr. Miller? Sorry, Mr. Morales, Chair Morales.
Sorry, I'd probably have to defer that one to Bala, if they were, as they're the ones that would be doing the work.
Through you, Councillor Morales, to Councillor Harris. I mean, we only do the work in emergency situations or extenuating circumstances. But having said that, if if requested, we could look at completing the work, hiring a contractor if we needed to, or if we could do the work ourselves, that could be an option too.
Okay, because my one question, sorry, and I know I'm definitely happy to defer. I saw Mayor Lehman and Councillor Thompson raise their hands, so I'm happy to defer to them. I guess the one thing that caught me was we could do a payment plan if we were the ones who did the work. So that's the part that kind of caught me. So I'll stop there, and if I have more questions, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll pass it along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any other questions, members of the committee? Was that a thinking, Deputy Mayor Ward, or a question? Just thinking? Okay. Non-members committee, Councillor Rima, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Morales. My question is to staff, was this break on city property or was it on private property?
Through you, Councillor Morales, to Councillor Rima, this was on the city property. Meaning it was between the property line and the water main.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rima. Mayor Lehman, go ahead.
Well, I saw Councillor Thompson's hand too, but I have a motion when the committee's ready.
Okay, my apologies. Councillor Thompson, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead first, and then we'll have discussion on the motion.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Bala. In the instance where we've had 16 of these, do you find that out of the 16, how many of them were homes converted businesses? So are we having an issue with the intended use where a dentist would use much more water, for their operation? Are we finding that the home conversions to businesses are running into this problem?
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Thompson. We don't have the breakdown of the type of business or the type of structures for the 16 instances where there was a break. But what I have gathered in the last few minutes, that of the 16, all but one were small size mains, meaning they were 19 millimeters to 50 millimeters. And there was only one connection that was a large connection, which was around 200 millimeters.
And just to follow up, Chair Morales, when these break, is there any work performed by the city at the original break where you've exposed the pipe and excavations occurred on our side, or is this 100% on the property owner?
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Thompson. In almost all instances, it's all the responsibility of the property owner. The city primarily undertakes the initial investigation and undertakes any type of emergency response activities that we need to do, but in almost all cases, it is the responsibility of the property owner.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Mayor Lehman, go ahead.
So one quick question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rania Sundran, the break in this case, where it is for a commercial property. What I'm trying to ask here is, do we have the same policy for residential properties, or is this different, distinguished between ICI and residential?
Through you, Chair Morales, to Mayor Lehman. the same policy applies to multi-residential units, but for single residential units, the policy is a little different in that for single residential units, only the costs from the property line to the
Yeah.
meter are the responsibility of the residents.
Yeah. So that's what I thought, and that's to sort of stick a pin in that for future. But so if I may, Mr. Chair, my motion on this one would be that number one, city staff be directed to where, I'm sorry, the address is it 526 Yonge?
352, sorry.
Sorry, wasn't even close. That staff be directed to work with the owners of the affected property to achieve the lowest cost repair possible. And the second paragraph is that staff be directed to permit the owners a payment plan interest-free for the cost of the repairs. And if I could just speak to that, Mr. Chair.
For sure. Go ahead, Mayor Lim.
So what would I be talking about here is the city would pay the bill. If we don't do the work ourselves, if we contract it out, we're still going to pay the bill. Otherwise, we'll do the work ourselves. We'll allow the business to pay it off over time. That is a common practice. It still means the cost falls on the business, but I believe it's consistent with our policy. And, you know, they are extraordinary times, but I think we have to stay true to the fact that we have had 6 other businesses in much the same situation pay at the time of the repairs or pay directly for the repairs. So the first part of the motion is that I want our staff to just actively help this business to try and find a lower cost repair, seeing as they seem to see the cost as, you know, less than half of what was quoted to them. And then the second half just allows them to put it on the water bill over time without interest. So, you know, for argument's sake, if it's $2,000 and they pay it off $100 a month, it's over 20 months. But whatever terms are worked out, our staff are commonly do that with property taxes or water bill arrears. So I think it's consistent with our practice and fair to the other businesses who've had to pay, but at least provide some relief to this business.
So thank you, Mayor Liam. And before you go to members of committee, the absence of a recommended repayment schedule, I'm assuming is by design, meaning you're going to leave that up to staff and the business.
Yeah, I always think in these matters, we're better to tell staff what we want the outcome to be and then let them work out the details with the property owner, both in terms of finding how to figure out how to repair it and then the terms. They're used to negotiating these sorts of things and discussing them, and I'm comfortable with that. Staff doing that. I don't think the committee needs to set terms.
Sounds good. Any members of committee? I'm just going to jump in, Miss Osterk. I saw your digital hand go up.
I'm sorry, that was actually an accident. I
Okay,
did want to say thank you, Mayor Lehman, Chair and Council, just for your time and consideration on all of this. I am very satisfied with that result, and I just appreciate you taking the time and consideration to help us in this situation.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Osterk, for the comments to members of committee and staff. Any questions? Councillor Harris, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank Mayor Lehman. I think that was the road I was kind of going down. I think he said it wonderfully well in the emotion, so thank you. And thank you, Ms. Osterk, for your gracious words and acceptance of that thought of the motion from Mayor Lehman. I hope that the group will support it. Thank you.
Any other member of committee? Questions, comments? Seeing none, non-members of committee? Seeing none, okay. No, that's it. Everybody's echoed the comments. I think I would just like to obviously highlight Councillor Jim Harris. Thank you for working with your business in your ward and bringing this forward. I know that, like as you said, you had very similar terms in mind to this motion, so they're very well captured in Mayor Lehman's motion, and it's a good compromise solution. So seeing no other comments, all those in favor of the motion on the floor, please indicate. Okay, that is unanimous. None opposed. Thank you, members of committee. Thank you, Ms. Oster. You're welcome to stay to watch the municipal government at work, or you can log out and we will not be offended at all.
I'll stay and watch.
Hey, you know what? Choices, I like it. Okay, so we're gonna move forward. The second delegation is by Roger and Connie Gray, Mr. Roger and Ms. Connie Gray, regarding a request for an exemption from the Regulatory Matters Bylaw 2010-036 to permit a gun range and education center within a light industrial zoned area. Please note section 6, the staff memo in response to the open delegation. Mr. and Mrs. Gray, please note that in accordance with the city's procedure bylaw, you will have 5 minutes to provide your comments. Just before we start, Ms. Cook, could I just get clarification? Is it 5 minutes per individual or 5 cumulative minutes, depending on how they brought it forward?
It would be 5 minutes for the entire open delegation.
Open delegation, perfect. With obviously, as you may have seen, with lots of time for questions afterwards. Mr. Gray, I see you online. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Chairman Morales, Mayor Lehman, Deputy Mayor, council members and staff. Good evening. Wendy, if you could, our PowerPoint's there, if you could just maybe, I'm going to speak for about 3 minutes. If you could just scroll through the PowerPoint as I'm talking, I'm going to be about 3 minutes, and then maybe just stop at slide 11, where we'll deal with a couple of questions that came up in the previous delegation. So,
Mr. Gray, I'm just going to jump in. We can start when you actually start. So the last 30 seconds of getting the PowerPoint, they don't count against your time. Just trying to give, make you aware.
Okay, thank you. So we've come before you tonight regarding bylaw 2010-306, discharge of a firearm within the Barrie city limits. We're looking for a permitted use letter or an exemption to the bylaw to allow for a state-of-the-art education and sports shooting facility in the light industrial zoning locations within Barrie. We have permitted use under the zoning location of light industrial bylaw 2009-141 recreational establishment. We have been in contact with the OCF office, the Ontario Chief Firearms Office, and they have approved our supplier contractor for the build out, Action Target. They've built many sport ranges and practice facilities for private clubs and law agencies across the country. Simcoe County Sports Shooting and Educational Academy, which is our new name, will be a state-of-the-art shooting range with a 3-tiered educational facility that would be located in Barrie, Ontario, and serve as a private club to members of the public, hunters, sport shooters, as well as local law enforcement, military, security industry. We intend to offer, again, a 3-tier educational system. Our vision is to be the go-to educational and shooting facility company for all those living in around the Simcoe County and Southern Ontario regions. Our intention is to gain national recognition for our brand all over Canada. And this is why we're willing to go the extra mile to ensure that we hire only the best that would help attain these visions and objectives. By using Action Target, we will meet all the sound abatement and security issues that have arisen in the past at other outdoor ranges. Action Target will be using the most advanced soundproofing and buffers, but we'll also be building a box within a box, which will leave an airspace between the outer and inside of the walls for extra deadening of the sound to a level of approximately 60 dB, which is the same as people talking. If you note slides 11 and 12, you'll see some insight from Action Target on the sound abatement. You can see kind of the soundproofing within there, some of the baffles, how they're used to redirect the sound, as well as anything projectile moving downrange. And then if you move to the next slide, go back one, you'll see they've done a test. Action Target conducted a test back in 2008 to determine the level of sound emitting from an insulated indoor range. And you can see that the ambient, the traffic, and a shot fired with different spots from outside of the gun club. The readings from 50 feet east and 10 feet south increased slightly from other readings, but they believe that was due to reverberation between the buildings. And that test was done by an independent group, Lynn Ashby. Oh, sorry, it wasn't independent, of Action Target, with assistance from Skylar Walken and Get Some Guns. There's also a link there for harmful noise levels. Again, 60 dB is us talking. It's the normal level of talking. So, there's not, you're an industrial area, light industrial, you're actually going to be less noise than any of the other normal factories that are probably out there. As well, moving on to the next slides regarding, so you can see some of the baffles and the redirection. Talks about them actually design the innovative combination of steel, wood, and acoustic tiling to create the safety baffles. The ventilation, everything is there. Like I said, they're all pre-approved with their state-of-the-art stuff with Ontario Fire Marshal. And then moving on to the next slide, 15 and 16, or sorry, there's some more wall deflectors and baffles. Sorry, I don't have it up myself. There we are. So as well, Action Target will use the most up-to-date state-of-the-art security systems. You can see, around the facility with cameras. You can actually hear it. It actually says it right there. Fedora integrates cutting-edge camera technology, security equipment, highly trained security professionals, advanced monitoring centers, and intuitive user access management tools to provide the industry's best security solutions. So obviously we're going to be using as much as possible a state of the art. And I believe there's one other slide. There we go. And it talks a little bit about the perimeter protection, access control, two-way audio, internal security, network video recording, and then again, in-lane monitoring as well, all high def. And I think the last slide after that. Oh, thank you, Barrie Council, for your time and consideration. And hopefully I didn't drag on too long, under the 5 minutes.
You're almost like within 3 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Gray. Members of the committee, do you have any questions or comments, either of the deputant or of staff? Councillor Harvey, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Morales. Just curious, again, I didn't check back into the previous location. Is this the same address that was being proposed the first time that you were before committee?
Hi, Councillor Harvey. No, well, they have another building that they're contemplating and building. We lost out on the other building. They wouldn't wait. They had other people willing to come in and rent it. I have chatted with the agent, and there's another building there that they're looking at building out, but there's also 2 other buildings along the same road now that would meet our requirements as well. So we would be looking for, something in the light industrial area that maybe there could be something that's there to add an amendment once we actually have the location, that we could come back and amend the permitted use or the exemption to that location. Just this kind of, it's the chicken and the egg sort of thing. Nobody wants to really commit to us until we know that we have the approval of council.
Follow-up, Chair Morales. Do you know what location you're looking at then? Because I think that's quite critical when it comes to our staff and also council considering this once it moves forward to general committee. And I would suspect that the Chief's Firearms Office, the location potentially could be critical to them when it comes to filing an application. Are you able to provide a little more specifics as to the general area? Like, are you still looking at remaining on King Street somewhere, or are you potentially looking at going to a different area of the city?
No, particularly like in the same area on King Street. We'd be looking for maybe approval in principle. Again, they are in that same location at King Street that we had talked before. There was 3 buildings. There was 2 buildings up, or 1 building up, 1 being built, and a third potential. So there's that one, and then there's 2 other ones that are also on King Street that are available right now to lease as well, that would meet our requirements with the size. So yeah, we are looking within that area.
Great. And just one follow-up question, if I could. I know we had quite a lengthy meeting after your first time before this committee and had some really good discussions, visited a potential site. Now, when it comes to the business plan, I was just wondering if you've narrowed down a little more concretely as to what your business plan is going to be, not from a financial perspective, but from a user perspective, because I know there was some discussion between yourself and I where you were seriously considering having this facility operating 24/7 without any staff working in it after hours. I was just wondering if you can update me and provide some clarity on what business plan and model you plan on using if this application is successful.
Well, again, it would be a private members only club. So in that I guess within the business plan, and most shooting ranges out there have an internal security and educational system that they run people through. And after they pass all those courses, they're brought in as members. And at that point there, our thought is that obviously there'd be operational business hours from, like, let's say 10 to 10 at night. What we've done and before, what I've seen in the past with some of these places is that they have like a VIP membership where they have a fob. They go through some extra training and they're allowed to, somebody who's on shift work, like let's say a police officer who's on shift work, he's coming off at 1 o'clock in the morning, can't sleep. He could go in and maybe do a little practice or whatever that he needs to get up to date with. Or a member who's working shift work would come in and go in the middle of the night. They would have access only to the back part of the range, again with the security system and the cameras in place. Everything is monitored. Everything's to that person knowing who's coming in and who's going out. I'm sure much like going into council chambers with fobs and everything that's there. Yeah.
Okay, actually, just one more follow-up that just came out of that. With our discussions too, obviously, we had some discussions in regards to some potential sensitive uses that were in quite close proximity to the location that you were considering. What steps have you taken since those discussions? Have you consulted with any of the sensitive use businesses in the area? Have you got any documentation of support from any of these sensitive uses? Or is that something that you haven't done at this point in time?
Yeah, I haven't done it at this point in time. Again, because, after our talk, I found out just after that we had lost that location. So I didn't want to, go raising or stirring the pot, maybe it didn't need to be stirred with some of those people, So yeah, that's just kind of waiting.
Great, thanks. I don't have any more questions, Chair Morales. I will have a motion if other members of council don't. I'll let other members ask any questions if they so wish.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Other members of committee have any questions or comments? Seeing none. Non-members of committee? Seeing none. Councillor Harvey, do you want to table your motion?
Great. Thanks, Chair Morales. So it's going to be a slight amendment to the staff recommended motion here that Staff and Legislative and Court Services Department be directed to work with the proponent, the Chief Firearms Officer of Ontario, and the Barrie Police to identify applicable regulations, the potential amendments to the City of Barrie bylaws that would be required to provide an exemption to allow an indoor gun range at 342 King Street. However, I guess we have to modify that and just say a gun range on King Street. And to also identify any sensitive uses within 500 meters of the proposed location, and to send out a mail out to all businesses on King Street seeking feedback on the application, and to report back to General Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Motion, would you like to speak to it, Councillor Harvey, or pretty self-explanatory?
It's pretty self-explanatory. I just added a few things in there, which was actually in line with the last time this came before committee, where I added the amendment. I think it's prudent upon us because this will be potentially the first gun range within the city limits. They're obviously asking for some exemptions through our bylaws. And being someone that lives in the area, I'm fully aware that there are some sensitive uses that are quite close to the proximity of the locations that are being looked at for this. And I think it's only prudent upon us to ensure that we get feedback from all the companies in the area and not just the sensitive uses. However, I think it would be key when we identify the sensitive uses and potentially any impacts that it will have on these businesses that have been in operation for several years in the area.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee on the motion that's been tabled? Mayor Lehman, go ahead.
I guess just in thinking about it, other than the potential for noise, what kind of impacts would those be, Councillor Harvey?
Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, through you, Chair Morales, to Mayor Lehman. There's been some concerns voiced to me through some of my residents that were following this the first go around. When it comes to people obviously carrying their guns in and out, obviously they would still be within cases. However, we do have at least one daycare in very close proximity to this location, which obviously I suspect when they are consulted, that may be of some concern to them. But I think it's only prudent upon us that we receive all the information before we provide an amendment to the bylaw to something of this nature.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. Any other members of committee have any questions? Seeing none, I'm going to jump in as a member of committee, then I'll go to non-members committee. Councillor Harvey, kind of as an extension to Mayor Lehman's, I didn't really understand what's a sensitive use to a gun range in today's day and age. Again, it's not an external gun range. It's not like a field in the middle of somewhere where it's just some fencing. This seems like a very high tech, essentially compound, secure compound. So, okay, daycare. You consider daycare a sensitive use, and also, I believe, again, correct me if I heard it wrong, Councillor Harvey, the fact that some of these users might be bringing in their own guns, etc. So the concern that you have is the fact that there's a daycare nearby and people are having their own guns that they're taking out of their cars and bringing to the building. Is that specifically the sensitive use, or is there more to that I'm just not capturing?
It's not directly a sensitive use to this business. It's a sensitive use, no different than when we've looked at it in other applications. A sensitive use is exactly like what you said, a daycare, or I know just down the road, literally a few hundred meters from the location that they're potentially looking at, is a trampoline location where young children go in, have birthday parties, that type of thing. And again, keeping that in mind, the setup, I can assure you that most of these people, if not all of these people, will be bringing their own guns with them. Very, very few people store their guns full time at a gun range. So we will have, depending on the setup, again, what we've been presented with to date is just a bunch of mock-ups that have been provided by a manufacturer. They're not an exact replica of what we're actually looking at, from what I understand. And until we know all the facts, I think it's important to us to seek public input before we make our decision when it comes to this.
Okay, and Mr. and Mrs. Gray, I see your hand up. I'll get to you in 1 second if you have clarification, but I'm just going to finish with my question here. And if you can mute your mic, that'd be great. Councillor Harvey, let me just clarify my comment. I wasn't saying the daycare is a sensitive use. What I was saying is I was just repeating what you were saying and then asking as in like, why is it sensitive? My question was, I still don't kind of see it. I'm not saying no, I'm not like disagreeing with you. I'm saying what I heard from you was people are bringing the guns. So the transition moments between gun in car to gun in building and then back gun in car, that close to a place, to a daycare or possibly a trampoline business. I'm going to call that a youth-oriented business. Is that the concern? The fact that guns will be in a gun in transportation will be in proximity? Is that the concern, or is it the morality of it? Or I'm just wondering what goes into your determination of sensitive use.
I'm not bringing in any morality into this. I think it's quite clear. I'm not quite sure why it's so confusing. I just want to know what sensitive uses are in close proximity. We are going to be having people taking guns out of the trunks of their vehicles and carrying them into this facility, most likely in cases. It's a new thing in this city that we're looking at. Our bylaws don't permit this. This is an exemption that's being asked for. And I think it's only incumbent on us to get all the information and to also seek input from these potentially what in past has been looked at as sensitive uses, whether we're looking at other matters that have been before this council. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that anything bad is going to happen with this, but I think we need all the information and to also get feedback from the area businesses that potentially could be impacted, especially those that fall within the guidelines of a sensitive use.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilor Harvey, for that clarification. And I can't move on without saying the pun. I also wasn't bringing morality into this. My last name is literally moralist, so I'd be remiss if I didn't make that pun. Miss Banting, are you on the call right now?
Miss Banting's not on the call, but Mr. Forgrave is.
Perfect. Mr. Forgrave, I'm asking this question to educate myself because Councilor Harvey made a good point. So right now, this is not allowed. I'm going to assume, and could you clarify, I know that setting off a gun within the boundaries of the city of Barrie is not allowed. I remember seeing that in paperwork throughout the years. Is the transportation of it also not allowed, or is that just, or do we only just really have a bylaw that prohibits setting off the firearm?
To you, Mr. Chair, it is just for the discharge of a firearm. The traveling, the carrying of a firearm is under the Chief Firearms Office for Ontario.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. Mr. and Mrs. Gray, thank you for being patient. Just because these are very important questions that require details of clarification. Is there anything that was asked or answered by anybody just now that you would like to provide clarity, so we're making sure we're getting facts straight on that?
Yeah, as Mr. Harvey, Councilor Harvey mentioned, I mean, obviously, people are educated when they get their gun license. You're not allowed to transport. In fact, you have to fill out a transition or transportation certificate with the OFC office. As well, once you have a gun club, you fill that out and you're allowed to only go back and forth. You're not allowed to stop. It has to be double locked. They're not loaded. They're separate, and it would be no different than, let's say, Cabela's, where somebody purchases a gun there. They walk out, right next to, the kids' land and trampoline places that are right there as well. But again, everything is in cases. And I guess a question that I have too is, I know that we're asking for for permitted use on this, but I understand that some of these gun stores that are already currently in Barrie also discharge firearms within their facility, to when they're fixing a gun or they're doing something. So, I'm again not trying to be picky here, but I know that does happen, whether it's Cabela's or some of the other gun stores that are in Barrie, that have a discharge can that they shoot into to discharge the firearm.
Yep. No, thank you, Mr. Gray. I think that's totally fair for you to provide context, and you're giving more information to let committee make that decision. So again, especially the Cabela's example is really good. I'm going to go to CEO Prowse. I saw your camera on a bit ago, and then I'm going to go to Councilor Harvey on this one. CEO Prowse.
Thank you, Chair Morales. I was just hoping to get some clarification. I don't believe I had the wording from Councilor Harvey, but had this been a planning application, I believe the applicant would have been paying the cost of the distribution notification to the 500 meters. And I only heard Councilor Harvey's motion very quickly, but I believe he indicated that staff would undertake that, and I wasn't sure if his intention was that the applicant would bear the cost or the city, and I was wondering if perhaps some clarification.
For sure. Councilor Harvey?
Actually, that's a really good point that you've raised there, CAO Prowse, because the cost piece of it I didn't even think about, so we can add a little piece of wording into that any costs bared will be the responsibility of the applicant.
Okay.
Thanks for the clarity. I appreciate it.
Perfect. And Councilor Harvey, you also had some follow-up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Morales. I don't know that it needs to be in the motion. However, I think it's important to put it on the public record here that It's just been brought up by Mr. Gray about the store discharging firearms. I'm not saying that that's not accurate. However, I think things like that should be included in the report back to General Committee, because I'm not quite sure that that's occurring, especially when we've got a bylaw. They would have to apply for a bylaw exemption themselves. And I've never known any armorer to, when they're checking a firearm, to shoot it when they're not sure if it's proven to be operational or not. So I'll just leave it at that. I just look forward to seeing the staff report come forward. Other than that, I don't have any further questions.
Perfect. Yep. Totally valid. Totally fair points, Councillor Harvey. Any non-member of committee have questions or comments? No, seeing none. So, Councillor, does anybody on committee need the motion read again, or are we good? Yes, read again. Councillor Harvey, go ahead.
Okay. If people want to follow along, it's contained within the circulation memo from last February. It's just a minor amendment to that. That staff and legislative and court services department be directed to work with the proponent, the Chief Firearms Office of Ontario, and the Barrie Police Service to identify applicable regulations, the potential amendments to the City of Barrie bylaws that would be required to provide an exemption to allow an indoor gun range on King Street, and that staff identify any sensitive uses within 500 meters of the proposed location, along with sending out a mail out to all King Street businesses seeking their feedback on the application and to report back to General Committee.
Okay. As read. Mayor Lehman, go ahead.
I'm sorry to get right into the details, but King Street's such an unusual street. It loops all the way around, and the north block of it is a long way from the south block of it. Councillor Harvey, did you, it's the weirdest street, right? It's the only one in Barrie that I'm aware of that does this. Was it your intention that it would be literally every business on King Street, even the ones that are quite a distance away?
Actually, yes. I don't believe
Okay.
the south loop. So and the reason for this, Mayor Lehman, is so the trampoline park is literally a couple hundred meters away on this same north piece of the loop that the applicant is potentially looking at putting the gun range. And the other sensitive use that I am aware of is literally in the building right behind it. However, it does face the south side. They're literally a stone throw from one another. And without getting into specific addresses, that's the reason I've got the motion worded the way it is. And we've also got a few restaurant type locations that are both to the east and to the west of the proposed area. So I think it's only prudent to include everybody in it. We're really not talking about a lot of businesses, because when you get to that far west end, there's still a lot of open fields where we don't even have any businesses yet.
Yeah, it's mostly manufacturers, but also the best Thai food in the city. Not that I have a preference as mayor. All Thai food restaurants in Barrie are equal, but this one is more equal than others. Okay, I'll support the motion, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions from members of committee? Nope. Okay. If not, I'll call to vote. Oh, Ms. Cook, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, Chair Morales, when you reread the motion, or sorry, when Councillor Harvey reread the motion, he forgot to include that the mail out be the responsibility, the cost of the mail out be the responsibility of the proponent.
Okay. Let's, that is to be included, right, Councillor Harvey?
Yes, definitely. I apologize. Yes, that got added midway. That's why I forgot about it.
Okay, no worries. So that is verbally added. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate. That's unanimous, none opposed. Thank you, members of committee. And thank you, Mr. And Mrs. Great. So the deputation is now complete. So once again, you are fair to exit the meeting or watch Democracy at Work on this one. We have no presentations today or updates or standing items or committee updates, but we do have two referred items, section 4. 4.1 is Motion 21-G-195 from General Committee on June 28th, 2021. The memo from B. Keene, Acting Supervisor of Enforcement Services, regarding a response to motion 20-G-202 noise bylaw enforcement. So that is a referred item to this committee. Are there, and Ms. Band, Mr. Forgrave is available to answer any questions from enforcement services. Do any members of committee have questions or comments about this referred item? Deputy Mayor Ward, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Morales. And I guess it's a question for staff and maybe the bylaw enforcement. I'm not sure. I mean, the whole purpose of this at the beginning, it's developed into other things too, but my push was to have the police enforce noisy vehicles based on, I guess you could say, quantitative, hard data. So they could say anything over 90, we could pass a bylaw, other municipalities have done it, anything over, for example, 90 decibels, and I'm not sure what the exact figure would be, you get a ticket. If they charge you and you have a machine that record your decibels, it wouldn't be right now, I understand, if they give tickets, if it appears that something's been modified to make it noisier. And it leaves the discretion of the police. And I think there should be some discretion. Obviously, if somebody's driving home with a noisy muffler and it's pretty clear the muffler just fell off, and the police should have some discretion. But I'd love to see, I want to know why we can't go to a system where we have a bylaw that sets a noise standard for vehicles, and then we just ticket vehicles that are over it. Why can't we have that? I think Councillor Harvey wants to say something. Maybe he wants to share a comment. I'm not sure.
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Ward. I'm going to go to staff first.
Yeah, Councillor Harvey, I think, might want to say something first, though. Maybe.
As it like to clarify your question.
Yeah. No, actually, I'll leave it to staff, and then I'll have a question after.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Ward. I just thought he wanted.
Okay. Sorry. Yep. No problem.
I just thought he wanted to get into the queue. But I know Councillor Harvey can have some industry insight into this. Staff, can we answer that question for Deputy Mayor Ward?
Through you, Chair, to Deputy Mayor Ward. Brian Keene, the author that is also on the call, but a bylaw could be passed. Our concern for us as enforcement services is stopping any of those vehicles with a noisy muffler. We don't have the authority or the powers to do that. It would be a bylaw that would have to fall to police. I assume there's nobody representing Barrie Police on the call to assist with that. But we would not be able to enforce it if it was passed.
So if I could just interrupt, and I know that, but the idea would, city police can enforce city bylaws. It doesn't have to be our bylaw enforcement. And in other municipalities, the bylaw enforcement and city police and the police forces work together. The police pull over the car, the city staff conducts the test to see whether it exceeds the noise. So I don't know why it has to be one or the other. I see the.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, to Deputy Mayor Ward. I wasn't stating that it would have to be one or the other. Working in tandem, sure, it could occur. Otherwise, it would be up to the police service to stop those vehicles or enforce if we were not together. A noisy muffler, unless the vehicle was idle and not moving, perhaps on private property or something like that, would we be able to do it on our own? But jointly, yes, that is something that could occur.
Thank you. Ms. McAlpin, I saw your camera turn on.
Thank you, Chair Morales, and through you to Deputy Mayor Ward. I think it's important to note that Barrie Police have indicated that it's not, in their view, the most effective use of their time to work on a joint enforcement initiative, and that the tools that they have available through the Highway Traffic Act actually give them more flexibility and are less time consuming than setting up noise meters that would require some additional investment for either Barrie Police or city to incur. And that's, I'm just referencing for people's sake, the memo that was prepared regarding this previously on the joint enforcement initiatives in Caledon and Oakville, which are both indicated were time consuming, and BPS was advised of those joint enforcement initiatives.
Thank you, Ms. McAvan. Deputy Mayor Ward, you still have the floor.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I want to find out whether what the police are doing now is effective and whether this would be more effective. I still get complaints about noise. It's actually become in the last few years one of the most frequent complaints I get. It's about noisy vehicles in my ward, certainly on places like Sunnydale Road, but also people that are talking about when they're at the waterfront or sitting on a patio downtown. The noise is, I mean, just I've experienced myself when you're there. There are very, very noisy vehicles, and I don't think we're doing enough. I think the police have stepped up efforts in the past few years. They've had blitzes, but it obviously isn't enough because there's lots of noisy vehicles still out there. And I'm not sure the answer, well, we're gonna have to live with it, is enough. I don't say staff is saying that, but I'm just saying that, you know, I think there may be another approach, something we can do to make it quieter. And anyways, I'll see if anybody else in the committee has any questions or any thoughts.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, you're next. Anybody else? Anybody else would have any questions or comments to get into the queue? Okay, Mayor Lehman would be next after that. Councillor Harvey, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Morales. And actually, if anything is misinformed in this statement, Mr. Forgrave or Mr. Keene, please jump in, because I wanted to talk about a situation that I had in my ward, and it was in regards to noise, but it was actually an air conditioning unit. And the struggles that they went through in being able to achieve an accurate decibel level that could actually be used for measurement purposes. Because the big struggle that they kept running into, even something as simple as someone having a lawnmower running in the adjacent area, or somebody having road noise close by and different things like that, posed a significant issue with them actually getting an accurate reading with a decibel meter. And there were several times that they had to attend the location to be able to come up with that true number, from what I understand. And that's just an air conditioner that's just stationary against somebody's house, trying to measure the decibel level of a moving motor vehicle when you've got all the other outside noise around playing a part in it. It is literally almost impossible to get a true actual measurement that, whether it's the police or the bylaw officers, to be able to provide an accurate decibel level for court purposes without raising some type of a doubt that some of the decibel reading was also attributed by some of the outside factors, whether it's other cars driving by. And really the only way that I could see that they could even ever accomplish this would be to take the vehicle into a garage where there's no outside noise to do this reading. I just don't think it's a feasible solution, especially when you think about there's already sections under the Highway Traffic Act for unnecessary noise, for not having a proper muffler, because some of these noisy ones, they've hollowed out the insides. They've done the same thing to their catalytic converters at times. There's already appropriate charges there that can be laid that are a heck of a lot easier to prove than for us to set a bylaw that sets a hard decibel level that creates a lot of difficulty for people to be able to prove without raising some doubt. Slightest little bit of doubt, they're not going to get a conviction. I just don't want to see our staff or the Barrie Police being pushed into a bylaw where there's some issues with even trying to get a conviction on it, especially when the tools are there. And again, obviously there's been several conversations with the police about, because it is an interest. I get tons of, I've spent probably 4 or 5 different phone calls last week about this exact reason, and it's predominantly on the main thoroughfares, Mapleview and things like that in my area. It is an issue, but I think it really comes down to the police can't be everywhere, and really I don't think it's us as politicians to start telling them how to do their job. That can all be done through our 2 members that are on the Police Services Board and discussions with the chief. But those are my submissions. I don't know if Mr. Forgrave or Mr. Keene want to add to that, but it did seem like there was quite a struggle just to get an accurate decibel level of a stationary air conditioner, let alone a moving motor vehicle with some peripheral outside noise.
Mr. Forgrave?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I agree that I know the exact incident that Councillor Harvey is talking about, and it was a very difficult one for us. Several visits to try to get proper readings, followed by a acoustical engineer that was hired by the city to try to determine whether it was a violation. And it took 2 visits to Barrie from the organization in Toronto to get proper readings to be able to settle the complaint.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Forgrave. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Mayor Lehman, go ahead.
Thanks, Councillor Morales. So I think, what is this, our 4th time kicking around this can? It's getting very frustrating listening to the football between police and bylaw. And I get that neither feel it's a good use of time or resources, but council decides that ultimately, and with the police board. I think this is the #1 complaint. There's no question in terms of the number of complaints I get. Is it the most severe issue affecting the city? No way. But it is pervasive. And, I think what I would report back to this committee is that the Barrie Police have heard the complaints and have conducted operations. They did Noisemaker last year, which was provincial, or a number of services. And then they just did another one over the late months of the summer here. Are they going to eliminate every illegal modified muffler? No. I think they're using social media pretty effectively to try and push the message based on the reaction from some of the owners of these vehicles on social media. They've definitely noticed the enforcement. I guess my take is, if there's a joint enforcement approach that's working in Halton region, I'm not sure why it doesn't work here. So maybe I'll phrase that as a question to Mr. Forgrave. Jason, are you familiar with what they're doing with HRP and bylaw in Halton region?
Mr. Forgrave?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mayor Lehman. I'm not myself. As I mentioned, Acting Supervisor Brian Keene is on the call. He is the one that did the research for this. Perhaps he can assist you with that question.
Thanks for that.
Mr. Keene?
Thank you, through you, Councillor Morales, to Mayor Lehman. We did reach out to the local municipalities that have been doing joint enforcement with police. They tell us they have the same constraints. They need to have police attend with them to pull over the vehicles. We don't have the authority to be able to do that. So, I mean, that's obviously going to be a constraint. When speaking with those other municipalities, they didn't want to speak on behalf of police, and nobody from police would necessarily respond to us directly. However, they said obviously COVID has been an issue lately, so they haven't done many inspections as of late. And they've also said that when they do inspections, that generally they're very time consuming and cumbersome because they do have to take time to set up the equipment. So they're only getting to 4 or 5 over the course of the period that they're set up. And changing locations is obviously an issue as well, because it takes time to set up the equipment again. So I mean, it's not that we can't do something like that, but when we're speaking with police and asking for their assistance in this, what we're getting back generally from the response from the traffic unit and things like that is that they would prefer to lay Highway Traffic Act violations, as Councillor Harvey stated earlier, because it doesn't require any equipment to set up. It's not subjective in nature like a noise reading or level would take. It's something that that they don't necessarily need to provide as much evidence for, and it's something they can lay the ticket much easily and get a conviction.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. Any members of the committee? Questions, comments? None? Councillor Alwyn, go ahead. I saw you earlier.
Thank you, Chair Morales. Yeah, this issue, I'm frustrated, as I'm sure all of us are, with this issue. It seems like there's no easy answer. Two things I would note, though, as potential lights at the end of the tunnel or potential solutions down the road. The City of Toronto recently adopted a motion at Council to have staff report back in early 2022 on the feasibility of noise radar. And that report would include talking about provincial legislation that would need to change to make that possible. And as I'm sure many of us know, the City of Edmonton did a decibel reading pilot project. My understanding is that it was to collect data about where how many noisy vehicles and where they tended to be, to inform enforcement. So it wasn't an automatic enforcement through sort of a radar ticketing system. But it seems in Edmonton, it didn't really have much of an effect because enforcement levels stayed basically the same. So they're having the same problems that we are. So I guess I think we have some hope looking forward to Toronto, seeing if they can lead the way in Ontario with a new form of automatic ticketing for noise violations for vehicles. Or if someone can figure out a way to regulate fragile masculinity through a bylaw, that would be great, because that seems to be a big part of why these vehicles are noisy in our area. So I don't know, I'm at a loss as well.
Thank you, Councillor Alwyn, for the comments. I appreciate the sentiment. I was just cautioning you about the fragile masculinity thing. Let's keep it objective. It's not a big deal, but just be aware for future discussion. I don't want discussions like this to devolve at my committee here. Any other members of non-committee have any questions or comments? Nope. Okay, seeing none, I'll just add a little bit of Deputy Mayor Ward, go ahead.
I was gonna, if you want to comment, I was gonna put a motion on the floor, but go ahead, comment.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. Yes, this is frustrating. Agree with Councillor Alban, agree with Mayor Lehman, agree with everybody. Frustrating. I'm frustrated that the representative from the police is not here. I understand we have 2 members of the board, but there's 21 people here on this call whose time would be better served, and we make better decisions if we had more of a somebody who could speak in an official capacity and not just our representation on the board. We hear that police have right now tools to do this, and maybe they can do it simpler without having to do partnerships with bylaw. We hear that other municipalities, the joint partnership is working, but we didn't get an on the record response directly from the police boards. Again, if this is the 3rd or 4th time that this issue has been here with people, again, in post 5 p.m. meetings, and again, I'm counting 21 people on this call, to me personally, it's frustrating not to have somebody, and listen, I know they've provided statements and feedback to questions and answers, but having somebody live or at least on Zoom that can kind of be part of the discussion and really clarify is valuable. We only hear from them in an official capacity a couple times a year, and I think this instance is somewhere where I would have appreciated that. So Ms. Cook, I'm going to just ask you a procedural question. I see Deputy Mayor Ward is putting forward a motion. I don't know what that motion is, but regardless, would it, and I know budget discussions are usually heavy. There's lots of service providers, there's lots of content, and I don't want to have half an hour, be towards noisy mufflers, but is there an opportunity to talk about this during budget time? And if, again, because we don't want to bog it down and tie down that meeting, what would you recommend from a procedural perspective to get a representative from Barrie Police that can speak to in an official capacity, where members of this committee and anyone else related can get some answers, procedurally speaking?
To Councilor Morales, I think that Deputy Mayor Ward's motion may help address what you're asking. I think that he's, if it's the one that we sent to him earlier, it's a request to Barrie Police to provide information for opportunities to enhance service for quantitative noise. But I would prefer him to jump in and maybe say, to make sure I'm correct in that assumption before I answer the question, if that's okay.
Okay. My apologies, I put the cart before the horse. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thank you. And I just wanted to point out that, I mean, one of the sad things is maybe this reflects Councillor Owen's point, is that electric vehicles now come with an option where you can make them noisy, to make them sound like you've got a muscle car, which is just mind-boggling. I mean, there's great hope that electric vehicles are going to make things quieter, and they're actually appealing to the buyers by saying you can make your car sound like it's a muscle car. Anyways, so my motion is slightly amended, and it would be simply that the Barrie, and I think it's important that we send a message to Barrie Police that we still push them. I mean, we do hear this from our residents, and this is my response. That the Barrie Police Services Board be requested to review opportunities to enhance the service's response to noise that is disruptive to others, especially motor vehicle noise. And 2, that the Barrie Police Services Board be requested to provide a memorandum to City Council outlining the results of this review. So once again, it's just keeping up some pressure on them, take another look, maybe hold more than one blitz a year, that kind of thing. So that's the motion. And I can read it again if the clerk didn't get it.
She's good. Perfect. She's good. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Any questions or comments from members of committee? Go ahead, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair Morales. Yeah, just a clarification on the wording, and actually Mayor Lehman or Councillor Thompson may be able to assist. Is it appropriate for this to be coming from the Police Services Board, or should it be worded as coming from the Barrie Police Service?
So, Councillor Harvey, just before let staff answer, this would be coming from the Finance and Corporate Services Committee. Is that your intent, or intent, right, Deputy Mayor Ward? Because like we're at Finance.
Yeah,
Committee.
but I think Councillor Harvey's question was whether we should be sending it to the Barrie Police Services, meaning staff, or sending it to the board. And I'm not sure, actually.
Okay, staff?
Maybe some of the members of the board can help.
To the board. Thanks.
Mayor Lehman? Okay. To the board. That's been accounted for. Thank you, Ms. Clerk. Okay. Members of committee, questions or comments? Nope. Members of non-members of committee, questions or comments? Nope. Okay, seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor, please indicate. Okay, that passes unanimously, none opposed. Thank you, members of committee. So that passes. Are there any other motions on this item? Seeing none, once, twice. Okay, thank you, members of committee. We'll now move on to 4.2, the second referred item, motion 21-G-206 from General Committee dated August 9th, 2021. And that is as follows, and I'm going to read it. Sponsor was Councillor Rietma on this, item discussion 8.3 of that meeting. That staff in the Legislative and Court Services Department consult with the Legal Services Department to investigate the feasibility of charging homeowners for not maintaining or cutting grass on the municipal boulevards and report back to General Committee. So that is the referred item. Do any members of committee have any questions, comments, or motions on this referred item? Councillor Harvey, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, yeah, Councillor Rietma, I believe you were the one that initially brought this to council. Obviously, it's a problem because you brought it forward. I was just wondering if you can speak to how much of a problem it is, because I know in my area, I could literally, I don't even need all 5 fingers to talk about how many addresses I'd be looking at in Ward 7. So I'm just trying to get a scope of what how big this issue is.
Councillor Rietma, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Morales. And in response to Councillor Harvey's question, I haven't got a detailed count, but I'm certainly going to need, all my fingers and all my toes and then some in order to give you that number. It's a pretty common problem, and then city staff end up, after some complaints, go out and cut cut it, and then 6-8 weeks later, it's the same problem. So yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that there are some people that just feel that they don't have to do it, shouldn't do it, and we end up, the taxpayer ends up doing it, and paying for it. And what it does is it tends to drag down the look of the whole neighborhood. I'm all in favor of people planting the boulevards and having flower gardens and all kinds of that kind of thing. But when it's just left to go to rack and ruin, that's where the problem comes in. And it happens, a fair bit in certainly in Ward 1.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rietma. Councillor Harvey, you still have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Morales. Question for staff, because my understanding is thus far when this type of issue arises, there's a door hanger that's left on the door reminding people to cut the boulevard. But on top of that, is there any other municipalities that we're aware of that have a bylaw that would make it a offense for not cutting one's boulevard?
To staff? Or, well, sorry, Councillor Harvey, was that staff?
Yeah, that's correct. Whether it's Mr. Forgrave or Ms. McAlpine.
Yeah, we'll start with Ms. McAlpine. Ms. McAlpine?
Thank you, Chair Morales. Through you to Councillor Harvey, we are aware of a couple of municipalities that have bylaws. They have not been challenged on them yet, to our understanding. But they do have bylaws and they charge a fee back to the homeowner if they don't cut upon notice. And Mr. Forgrave or Mr. Keene may be able to provide further details on those municipalities. I believe Richmond Hill is one of them.
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Harvey. Yes, Richmond Hill is one of them, as is Brampton, Toronto, and Pickering. Those are all ones that we were able to find information on or ask some questions about their bylaw.
And just to follow up, if I could, Chair Morales, do we know roughly what type of fines or chargebacks are involved in those municipalities, just to give us an idea?
Certainly, through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Harvey. A lot of them had used administrative penalties or fees. They didn't have fines in place, but most of them are anywhere from $250 to approximately $470 for these administrative fees, depending on the number of visits that have been made, if work had to be completed, etc.
Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And just I'll keep going to members of committee, but just to make everybody aware, we're going to lose one, possibly two members of committee, voting members of committee, one in the next 6 minutes. So if anybody is going to move a motion, it would be prudent, and I would ask that you table it now. So to give those members of an opportunity to vote. I know I'm not trying to quell discussion, but I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact I want members of committee to have the chance to vote on this. Also, everybody needs to eat before 7 p.m. So any other members of committee have any questions, comments, or motions? Councillor Jim Harris, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Thank you, Chair Morales. I think given that we're looking at feasibility, I think that hopefully gives staff a chance to answer questions like, I mean, what's the cost to us as far as manpower or staff power to cut the boulevards that are counting past Councillor Rietma's hands and toes. I mean, I guess that's part of the challenge too, right? Is if we have to cut them, we have to get there in a reasonable time to meet the neighbors' expectations who aren't happy with the boulevards being unkept. So I'm happy to, given that we're looking at feasibility, get more information, answer the questions that we still have, and then maybe we can move forward. Is that what we're looking at? I guess it's going to be a motion to move it toward council, whatever. But I mean, I'm okay with the feasibility look.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jim Harris. Non-members of committee, do you have any questions or comments, especially the sponsor of the motion? Councillor Kungle, then Councillor Alwyn, 626.
Thank you, Chair Morales. So a couple of quick comments, and I'll leave most of my comments back to when this comes for conversation, but around, I believe, Councillor Jim Harris's comments, it would be great to actually have that data if that can be brought back in the feasibility study, because I'm trying to also understand how would this play out. So if you've got a complaint about a boulevard, but not the front lawn, are you actually going to take a proactive approach when we're going out to a boulevard to do a fee? So what are we currently doing around fees for front yards? How does that tie in when we're thinking about part of a lawn? I struggle with the boulevard piece, and it perhaps being one segmented out from a broader conversation around property standards overall, and how are some of the conversations and investments we're talking about considering in the 2022 budget for enforcement officers potentially being able to take proactive approaches around enforcement. So if the information from the staff report around feasibility could tie into that broader picture of how do we deal with and fine property standards that tie to lawns.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Alwyn.
Never mind, Chair Morales.
Thank you, Councillor Alwyn. Councillor Rima, anything further?
Sure, just one last item. I'm with Councillor Harris. This is a request to look at the feasibility of this. I think getting a little more information will be helpful, and we may in the end decide not to do it, but I would like to know, have some good reasons for whatever decision we end up making. So.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rima. I'm going to go back to members of committee. Last call for questions, comments, or motions. Any from members of committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for this point. We're now on to section 5, advisory committee reports. We have 6 advisory committee reports to be received. Ms. Cook, just want to clarify that I didn't butcher something.
The members of the committee were talking about staff reporting back on the feasibility, but there's a referred matter on the floor, an item, and no one's put it properly on the floor to be voted on, so I wasn't sure if the committee wanted to vote on that as a motion or they just wanted to receive it for information purposes. So if we could just get some clarity on that, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cook. I believe that I carried it out properly, question, comments, or motions, and came back to members of committee a second go around. The only reason why I might have just rushed some of the non-members of committee was the time that I do know that Councillor Jim Harris has to go in less than 60 seconds. So it was not an attempt to filibuster, and my language was clear. So if there are any objections from members of committee about how I communicated the ability for that to be an option, comments, questions, or motions? Okay, seeing none, section 5. So section 5 is advisory committee reports, and we have 6 advisory committee reports to be received. Could I have a member of committee put the following advisory committee reports on the floor to be received? That is 5.1 is report of International Relations Committee, September 7th, report of accessibility, September 9th, report of Town and Gown, September 22nd, report of Seniors Advisory, September 27th, report of International Relations, October 5th, and report of the Investment Board, October 13th. If we can do an omnibus bill for those, unless people want to separate them, could I have a member of committee put those? Councillor Harvey, saw you first. Thank you. Put on by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Lehman, Mayor Lehman. Are there any questions or comments or motions from these referred reports or reports to be received? Seeing none from members of committee, Councillor Alwyn, I saw your.
I just want to clarify, this isn't the recommendation from the seniors advisory yet, right? We're just receiving the reports?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions from non-members of committee? Nope, seeing none. Okay, all those in favor, please indicate. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, members of committee. Those are received. And we have one recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Alwyn, from the advisory committee reports. The first recommendation is from Seniors Advisory from the meeting September 27th, 2021. The recommendation is as follows: demographics of seniors in Barrie, environics analytics, that staff in the Rec and Culture Services Department investigate the feasibility and costs associated to purchasing an annual city licensing fee with environics analytics in order to gather data and analytical information on the demographics of seniors in the city of Barrie and report back to Seniors Advisory Committee. Does a member of committee want to move that motion? Just to put it on the floor. Okay, Deputy Mayor Ward has moved it. It is on the floor. Questions, comments, or amendments? Go ahead, Councillor Thompson.
I just put my card up to move it.
Are you just working on your sound, Councillor Thompson?
No, he moved it, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. No, you don't want to speak to it though. Just self-explanatory. Okay. Any members of committee have any questions? I'm gonna go as well to non-members of committee because I know they are on the committee. Okay. Non-members of committee who want to speak, please indicate. Councillor Alwyn and then Councillor Kungle. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Morales. I'm not on the Seniors Advisory. I know Councillor Kungle is. I think this is great. I just wanted to provide some context from the Barrie Public Library. We had a subscription to Environics. It was around $20,000 a year. And we removed that from our budget a couple of years ago because we just found it wasn't as useful for the high cost. But it was also noted by our CEO at the time that we had a shared Environics subscription with Barrie Fire at one point. So I'm not sure if Ms. McAlpine knows the answer to this, whether Barrie Fire still has a subscription to Environics. No? Okay. Because I was just going to see if that was a possibility. But there might be other tools that the library uses that the Seniors Advisory Committee might want to check out as well. I know they have some awesome demographic tools besides Environics, but just want to put that out there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alwyn. I'm going to come back to members of committee. Second go around. Do we have any questions, comment? Oh, my apologies, Councillor Congo. So sorry. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Thanks, Councillor Morales. So for a little bit of context here, it was Barrie Public Library that we welcomed to the Seniors Advisory Committee that presented. And in particular, for those that may not have been aware from the footnoting, I believe each of us received a package on our wards around demographics. So while the framing of this is about seniors, there's a lot of really great information around overall demographics of residents in the city of Barrie and comparators. I would echo that committee felt it was a high value resource and was a benefit to them to actually receive some of the information when we were looking at the lens of seniors around where they live, number of seniors, how they spend their time, where they volunteer, how many rent versus own from affordability and an income. So it does give a pretty good picture. I would encourage as a member of the Seniors Advisory Committee that it would be great to explore the benefit of where this data could be used and what data we're currently using across the city that may also benefit respective advisory committees that seem to seek information around different mandates that they have. And if this could be a great tool to use and or have annually a bit of information that's provided on the demographics at the time. So it seemed to be quite up to date, more recent than Stats Canada and Census. And while they were aware of the price ticket of about $20,000, we're keen to see about how the city could be providing that committee as an example with up-to-date data, and did appreciate the access Barrie Public Library provided.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kungle. Second go around, members of committee, questions, comments, or amendments? Councillor Harvey, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question for Councillor Kungle. I was just wondering if it's been explored with staff ahead of this motion coming before us about this information potentially even being available, since we're hearing that Barrie Libraries had an account with Environics, and so has the fire department. So there potentially could be the data available. I just don't know how old it would be. Just wondering if that's been explored before we go passing this.
Great question, Councillor Harvey. Ms. McAlpine, we'll start with you if you're able to. If not, we'll go to the appropriate staff member.
Thank you, Chair Morales. Through you to Councillor Harvey. Barrie Fire and Emergency Service had an account for a specific survey that was done related to, if I recall, it's been several years, related to fire safety. As far as I'm aware, no city department has a current account with Environics at this time. The cost was a factor.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. McAlpine. Any other members of the committee? Questions, comments, amendments? I'll jump in here for a bit. I'm not supportive of the motion on the floor as written, simply because of the cost. So I've been on the Barrie Library Board for 7 years. Environics was definitely there day one when I got there in 2014. I got that from Mr. Vanderklees. And I know the information is valuable and well done. But however, I think, again, we've heard comments about what Barrie Library decided in terms of priorities and value. We've heard about it from Barrie Fire. And for me, it would be the same thing, specifically because this is a subscription service. I'm not opposed to getting that data for the Seniors Committee, just as much as I'm not opposed to getting that data for Invest Barrie, as much as the planning department, as much as whatever department in the city of Barrie needs it. But I'm not supportive of the motion as it stands, even for staff to look into getting a subscription service for it's not even a reference committee, it's an advisory committee. So I would be, so I guess here's my question to Ms. McAlpine. Would staff appreciate an amendment to this that says for staff in general, no specific department, to look into the feasibility of getting data either on a one basis or on a subscription basis or on some sort of cyclical basis every 4 years, every 3 years. I don't know what that number is. In order to support city services, all departments, and report back during budget time, something where staff would go, hey, we hear you want data. Maybe an advisory committee, maybe a reference committee, maybe Invest Barrie. This is what we recommend you do. That way people aren't piecemealing different subscriptions and maybe not even paying a subscription, maybe somehow doing a thing where they get a one-off. Would that be helpful as an amendment, or is it unnecessary and this motion can stand on its own? And if it fails, staff can consider that if they're not already considering for budget intake forms. Ms. McAlpine?
Thank you, Chair Morales. Staff do receive the Stats Canada information on the 5-year cycle. It is released 5-year cycle to complete the survey. It takes a fair amount of time for them to release it, and it goes in segments of release. But there is information that's available. It may not be as targeted. Often with Environics, you can do a specific survey to specific areas. If council desires to have staff investigate this, we will. To date, I think staff have entered into the subscription where they felt that there was value for the corporation and not continued it when our priorities financially or otherwise have indicated that it's not the best value for the taxpayer.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McAlpine. So I'm done with those comments. Is there any member of committee that maybe wants to move an amendment to direct staff to work with the Seniors Advisory Committee at getting information that is already available? Any member of committee? I don't see anything. Go ahead, Councillor Congo.
Thank you, Chair Morales. So I think that's good enough information and rationale to take back to the Seniors Advisory Committee, then have them identify, since they did see the value in the data they had, if they need anything further. And perhaps it's then a different shift of the conversation that might lead to what are we providing or what can we provide all of the new term committees in 2022, 23 around information with respects to their mandate, and just make sure there's a package of information there if that's not already done. And that might just be a different approach where we're doing a bit of a different customer service approach for those members coming in to different topics around different advisory committees. So if it's not of interest to purchase it, I don't want to create a make work project or move this in a way in which it doesn't meet the intention, I think, of the interest of the committee.
Okay. Great point, Councilor Hungo. Ms. Cook, do you need any motions from the clerk's office as they shape the terms of reference for committees for the new term, or is that not necessary at this time?
That's not necessary at this time.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Cook. Members of committee, questions, comments, amendments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as tabled by Deputy Mayor Ward, please indicate. One in favor, is that in favor, Councilor Thompson? Yeah, nope. Okay, that's a no. One in favor, all those opposed, please indicate. Okay, I'm also opposed. That motion fails. Thank you, members of committee. Moving on to the next one, reports to committee, section 6, memo from D. Morrow, manager of water operations concerning a water service repair for 358 requests. Ms. Cook, has this already been taken care of earlier?
Yes, Chairman Wallace, it has. It was just the information, the background information for the open delegation earlier this evening. So we do not need to deal with it.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, members of committee and non-members of committee that attended. I'll adjourn the meeting at 6:42 p.m. Please go eat, go to the bathroom, and we'll see each other in a couple minutes. Take care.